Darlene Pendell, and I'm your host for Our Community Matters. We have three guests this evening: Jan Goldberg, who is a voter registrar for Cook County; Officer Persky, who will talk to us about DUI and victim impact; and then we have a traffic problem here in Riverside. And then lastly, Rick Rodriguez will be speaking to us about estate planning and investments. But our first guest is Jan Goldberg. Hi, Jan. How are you today?
I'm just fine, and thank you for having me on the show.
I'm glad you're here. Jan, you're a teacher at Riverside Brookfield High School also, aren't you?
I sure am.
Okay. My guess is that you have many 18-year-olds within the building that you register for voting. Is that right?
Your guess is totally correct. A lot of students turn 18 during the winter of their senior year, some even in the fall, and we even have some juniors who are turning 18 this fall who are currently eligible to register to vote.
But tell me this, are there some people, and not just high school students, but are there some people who say, you know, why register to vote? It really doesn't make a difference whether or not I vote.
Yes, there's many people that say that. Many people. Too many people for my taste. High school students say it, adults say it, of all ages, and if you look at statistics in the newspaper, our voter turnout is getting lower and lower, and it's really scary.
What do you mean lower and lower? Give me some percentages.
I think in the last primary that just took place in March of 2000,
Sure.
the numbers were somewhere in the 20 and 30% range. And that's of people who registered to vote.
Right. So you're talking more than 80% of our population doesn't vote?
Well, this was in the Illinois primary.
Okay.
Okay, let me modify that just a little bit, because John McCain had dropped out.
Right.
Bill Bradley had dropped out of the Democratic primary by the time Illinois rolled around.
Sure.
There were local referenda on the ballot. There were things that were still semi-interesting to people. At least I hope they were semi-interesting to people. But unfortunately, that low turnout was true in many states across the nation. I'm just quoting Illinois statistics.
All right.
And it's scary when you think about it, because I think that, you know, if our democracy is based on people participating, that is the very definition of democracy.
Indeed.
And if people don't participate, well, I always tease my students, if they don't vote, I get to vote twice.
Well, what about...
Not literally, of course, but...
Of course, well, there has been a time...
Well, this is
like,
true.
This is Chicago,
true.
right?
This is true.
Okay.
You can be dead and still vote in Chicago.
Right. Well, what did you mean by you get to vote
What
twice?
I meant by that is the people that do vote, they have more power. Because it's almost as if their numbers are more important than they really are, because of the people who are not coming to the polls. And they also think their single vote does not make a difference.
Right. Now, how can you address that, though?
Okay,
A single
I bring
vote?
up my favorite historical example.
All right.
The 1960 election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And if you count up in all the precincts across America, it's one vote for precinct that separated those two men.
That's right.
Now think about it. If you had stayed home, you were too sick to go to the polls, and you really wanted Richard Nixon, you'd be kicking yourself.
Do you think right now that the reason that people aren't voting is that they have a real different kind of perspective on politicians?
Different in the way that we had when we were younger?
Well, I'm older than you, so I'm not sure. But certainly there was a real respect. I don't think that's necessarily the same right now.
I think Watergate colored a lot of people's politicians, a lot of people's perceptions of the politicians. Corruption was always around, but the press got so over-aggressive during Watergate and reported so many mishaps and so many corruptions.
Okay.
But I think now people are looking at politicians with that kind of jaundiced eye.
That's right.
Type of thing. I think that is a very good point, a very good reason. But I don't think that's the only reason. I think people don't feel a real stake in what's going on. For example, when I was 18, you weren't allowed to vote until you were 21.
Correct.
And then somewhere in the middle of those 3 years, the amendment changed. It changed, you know, when I was 19. and we were so excited.
I
We
can
were just so excited to vote for president the first time, but then the Vietnam War was raging, the student movement was raging.
But Jan, you know what? There are a lot of people in our audience who have not lived through that and are still talking about not voting. When we come back, let's talk to that younger generation of people and tell them why they should vote.
Okay.
Okay? Jan, you know, you've talked about, well, Watergate and the Vietnam War, but you know what? Most of the people that are coming to register to vote and considering about whether or not they're going to vote, not only have not been part of it, but they only read it in the history books.
Right.
So we're talking about a different generation of people that we need to encourage them to vote. What are you going to say to them? Why should they?
Exactly, and you're right, because most of the students that I registered to vote in the last year were all born in '82. Reagan was president. People had CD players and not record players.
Oh, right.
I don't think this
no more albums.
Right, they don't even know what albums are.
Right.
I tell them what I think is very ironic. The most votingest population, if that is a verb, the most voting population are the senior citizens.
Indeed.
Now think about that. I tell my students, they are the ones that have the least amount of time to live with the decisions that the politicians make today. They vote for politicians that will be in office you know, a long time or a short time, but
Sure.
the older the generation, the least amount of time they will be alive to live with those decisions.
You're saying for the impact of what the decision is.
And I look at my students and I say, you are 18. Who you vote for today can affect you, or who you don't vote for, because that's a choice too if you don't vote.
Absolutely.
That choice that you make to vote and whom to vote for when you do vote will impact you the rest of your lives.
What's their response to that? Because my guess is when you say it'll impact you, that still is kind of ambiguous.
Right.
You know,
right.
It's amorphous. What is that? What's the impact?
Okay, I talk about inflation. I talk about the gas prices that are going up right now.
Indeed. Right.
And I go back to the 70s when President Nixon took off the wage and price controls and started messing around with the prices in our economy.
Sure.
And I'll say those prices caused an inflationary spiral that you are living with right now.
Okay.
And I always tease them. I say, when I retire, you're going to be paying for me.
Indeed.
Okay.
Right.
Not for me personally, because you know we were teachers here. We have this wonderful
Well,
pension.
we don't have to go into
well, that's
that,
a whole
but
other topic.
Indeed.
But Social Security, they pay into it to support us. They'll be supporting us through Medicare taxes. They'll be supporting us
Sure.
no matter how you look at it. So they're going to be making decisions today that will impact them much throughout their lives. And so I try to get them interested that way.
Okay. And do you have some effect with that?
It's hard to say.
Okay.
Okay, when they
Right.
look me straight in the eye, they'll say, oh yeah, we'll vote, we'll vote. Well, they're sitting in my classroom, what are they going to say?
Right, exactly.
But the numbers don't bear this out.
Tell me this, how do you, I know when our children were small, we would take them and literally take them with us to vote, and then we'd go and have a cookie afterwards. And
Yes,
I thought that was my thing in contributing that this is a big event to do.
And do they vote now?
They do, they do.
Okay.
So what do you do to encourage your own children to make sure that they're going to vote?
I vote in my own children's grade school, so that helps. You know, they always know when there is an election because they always see the American flag in front of their school, and they see people passing out literature and things. And the teachers help me out here because our state representative Bill O'Connor was recently in the grade schools giving a talk right before the primary.
Right.
'Cause he was in a rather hot race.
Right.
And then they do mock elections in schools.
So you're saying...
I guess I'm not quite answering my own children. I constantly talk politics in the house. I probably bore them to death, but I talk about things, and once in a while it'll cause a little bit of a click, just
All right.
a little bit.
So give me, in the last seconds that we have in this particular part of the interview, tell me what you'd say to people who are considering whether or not they're going to vote, because it always is a choice. What would you like to say to them to encourage them?
If they do not vote, they can't not complain for the next 4 years.
I agree.
They cannot open their mouths.
Okay.
Because we'll get the bumper stickers, don't blame us, we voted for the other guy.
All right, Jan, thanks so much for coming in.
It was a pleasure.
Indeed. Welcome back to Our Community Matters. The second segment of the show is with Officer Persky from the Riverside Police Department. He coordinates the DUI unit in our city. Officer Persky, Stuart, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Can you tell me, please, for those people who don't know, would you say what DUI is?
Well, it's a driving while under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or other substances.
Okay.
And that unit encompasses a lot of different things. Not only do I run the unit and keep all the paperwork together, coordinating all the officers in my town, but I also go out and do community outreach projects such as teaching at the high school and also spending time in the court system in our area.
Okay, can you tell me, what do you do when you teach at the high school? Do you come into the health class, or what class do you come into to give them this information?
I'm actually in the driver's education program where I'm not only sharing my own personal experiences of tragedies that have occurred in my life through drugs and alcohol, but also the shattered lives that I've seen while on the job through people drinking, driving, getting into crashes. I spend a lot of time focusing on, I'm an under 21 years of age drunk driving specialist. I spend a lot of time in the zero tolerance program at the high school.
Okay. Zero tolerance means don't drink and drive, period. Is that what you mean?
So that mirrors the state law where if you're under the age of 21, you can't have a drop of alcohol in your system and operate a motor vehicle without getting into a lot of trouble.
Tell me what the impact of that is. Well, let's say that, I hear kids say that, golly, you can have a beer and go ahead and drive. I'm not drunk kind of thing, but you're saying there's a different thing, a different law. What is that?
The standard for if you're under 21, you can't drink at all. So what I'm doing is the Riverside Police Department stance is we do not want to have a tragedy coming out of the Riverside Brookfield High School or our area for that matter.
Of course.
So I'm actually in the high school creating a relationship with the teenagers, letting them know that the police department, the Riverside Police Department, supports them in not drinking and driving at all.
Okay. I'm going to ask you it one more time just so that I'm really clear. Any alcohol at all for someone who's under 18, what's the impact of that?
Well, it's under 21. What's going to happen is they're going to end up going to jail, you're arrested, your car gets towed away, and you're going to end up with high court costs, not to mention the suspension of your driver's license. And that's getting off easy. That's hoping that you don't get into a crash where somebody else is injured, because then that brings on a whole other set of consequences.
And that's what you're talking about when you're talking about the victim impact unit, correct?
Right, the victim impact panel at the local courthouses. So what I did there was I'm an invited guest speaker for the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Students Against Drunk Driving, and the Alliance Against Intoxicated Motorists. Like, they really see what I'm doing, and I'm out there, and they like what I have to say. So I'm sharing at the courthouse. Now, what the victim impact panel is...
You're sharing, I'm sorry, you're sharing what at the courthouse? Just your perspective on it, or are you bringing people together to give information to adults?
It's not only adults, but it is bringing the information out there, letting them know what the consequences are. It's based around responsibility, decision-making, and consequences. That's what my conversation is. I also bring in discussions about serious crashes that I've investigated myself here at the police department, and other crashes I've known about, particularly officers that have been killed in line of duty being struck by drunk driving motorists.
So you have people who are convicted of drunk driving, and then you give them the reality of what possibly can happen when you're driving under the influence, the horrendous things that can happen, and the impact on not only the people who are perhaps fatalities, but the people who then have to live with that death in the family.
Right.
Okay. Does it make an impact? Would you say for all the people that hear your presentations and from those other people, do you think that people walk out of there saying, man, I'm never going to do that again?
Absolutely. The feedback I get after talking with these adults and the people that are under 21, it really get the message, not only from me, but from the other family members that share their loss and the tragedy. They really get, there's really an effect on what they're up to, that they see that they did something very, very dangerous. And it's also opened the door for me, because they see what I'm doing over there, and I've opened the door to being invited guest speaker at other high schools. Sure.
When we come back, we're really going to switch gears, and we're going to talk about being safe in a different kind of way. All right?
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, Stuart. You know, it's very hard to make this transition, but I think there's a global picture that I have here. We're going from keeping people safe on the road by keeping drunk drivers off the road. correct?
Exactly.
And now we're moving into an Environmental Safety Commission, of which you present and you have a concern for. You've talked to me about a situation here on First Avenue that impacts safety in our town. Can you first tell me about how did you get involved in this Environmental Safety Commission?
What the police and fire department did, we created a project called the First Avenue Traffic Safety Project, which directly is going to make a difference by reducing crashes and saving lives in our community. I was looking for a project that would really be an expression of what I think police work is all about, which is being proactive and saving lives, reducing crashes. It's a huge opportunity for me.
Stopping it before it even starts is what you're saying.
Right.
Now, First Avenue, I don't even know how far First Avenue goes. I assume in Chicago it goes north and south a very long way. Be very specific, because we're talking about Riverside.
Yes.
Okay, where are you talking that there is a safety issue on First Avenue?
So this is 2 blocks south of the high school. So there's the intersection of 1st and 4th. 2 blocks south of there, past the viaduct, there's a T intersection, where there's a side street called Wabansie Road.
This is on the left-hand side as you're going south?
So if you're going southbound First Avenue, it's on the right-hand side of the street.
Oh, it's on the right-hand side.
So basically what's happening, it's a busy highway where there's heavy truck traffic and it's speeding in excess of 40, 50 miles an hour. People are coming around a blind corner and they're seeing somebody stopped at that intersection and make a left turn. And what we're seeing is a high incidence of sideswiper rear end collisions with injuries.
Oh my. And have you kept track of that?
Well, part of the traffic safety study was we pulled the accident records for the last 6 years. We also pulled all the accident data and injury data from the fire department. We gathered it all together, and the village also had a traffic safety study done by a civil engineer. We've compiled all that data and we forwarded it to the Safe Environment Commission.
Okay, so they have the information. What are you hoping they will come out of that study with? What is their suggestion, and who do they suggest it to?
Well, the civil engineer made the suggestion that they limit left turns at that intersection, both coming into and going out of Wabansie Road. And that was given to the Safe Environment Commission. They're going to chew on all this data and give their suggestion, which is probably going along with the civil engineering study, no left turns, and giving that to the Village Board of Trustees, where they could actually change a law, change an ordinance to make a difference at that intersection. So
you're hoping that no left turns will be allowed?
Not particularly. That's not what I'm hoping. I'm hoping we can make a difference at that intersection. And depending on whatever the Safe Environment Commission wants to do, it'll be fine with me. We just basically presented the data showing that there is a problem there, and already we've raised public awareness like 200%. Everybody knows there's a problem there. It's just a matter of what we're going to do. And we also installed new street lights there. Commonwealth Edison responded to the needs of the community, where actually the lighting has been increased at the intersection. You come around that busy corner now and you can actually see there's an intersection there.
It had been very dark in that area, because that's the way I go home from school. So you've tried to decrease the amount of collisions by at least lighting it so that people can see what's going on. And you're hoping to limit the amount of turns that could be made at that particular intersection.
We've identified that the left turns are the most dangerous. What we're seeing is mothers and fathers in minivans with a carload of kids trying to make a left turn across 4 lanes of busy First Avenue traffic, where there is an opportunity for a side collision, a T-bone crash, which would be the most devastating, and we really don't want to have that happen in our community. So
what you've just done is provided the community not only this problem, but made them aware to be very careful when they're making that turn.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in this evening.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Welcome back. This last segment, we're going to be speaking with Rick Rodriguez, who is the Vice President for Financial Services of the First National Bank of Brookfield. Rick, hi, how are you this evening?
Fine.
Good. We're going to take this segment and we're going to talk about investments. Now, if we were investing in any of the e-commerce business or Amazon.com or any of those, I would assume that people would go directly to their computer and use that as a device to invest. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, some people do that, but it's not always the best approach. I guess it makes sense to do it if you know something about investing, but if you don't, it's not necessarily the best approach.
Okay, I know nothing about investing, and so I can really ask some good questions here.
I hope so.
Okay, What do I need to do? First of all, is there a particular amount of money that I need to have before I even look at investing?
Well, it really doesn't depend on a particular amount of money. I think really the important thing is to have a desire to start investing for your future, and many people can start an investment program for as little as $25 per month. You don't need to have hundreds or thousands of dollars to begin your investment program.
So that if I'm willing to take out of my budget $25 a month, what would be my first step? Come into your bank and?
Yes, we could get you set up with a systematic investment program and even have it deducted automatically from your checking account if you would like. So this way, once a month, $25 could go into a mutual fund type investment or something else if that's what you're inclined to invest in.
So do I need to make some decisions before I come in and before I make this $25 a month investment?
Actually, what we would do is spend time with you to profile your situation, your need, and basically work with you on trying to determine, first of all, what is your objective for this money?
Okay.
Every pot of money really should have an objective in mind, and then we have to work together to develop a strategy on how to get there and do it in such a way that it fits your investment risk tolerance.
Investment risk tolerance means?
Basically what that means is understanding the concept of risk versus reward and what kinds of investments are suitable for you. Some people can handle highly volatile investments such as stocks and mutual funds, particularly aggressive mutual funds, because the day-to-day volatility doesn't bother them. But you have other folks who, quite frankly, wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So even if you can show an objective need for that kind of investment with your program, if they aren't suited and if they wouldn't feel comfortable, then it's not really appropriate for them.
So the first question you need to ask yourself is, how much risk are you willing to do?
That's one of the questions. That's correct.
The other is, what do you want out of this particular investment?
Yes, and really what we mean by that, if you have a long-term objective, let's say, for example, retirement, then you have to look at those kinds of investments that are really oriented towards a retirement objective, such as equity, stocks, growth mutual funds, investments of that sort. But if you have, let's say, for example, an accumulation objective, near term, you're saving for a down payment for a house, say within 2 years, then that money doesn't belong in the equity markets.
We're talking about real aggressive investing, if you need something within 2 years.
Yes.
Is that the longest amount of time, do you think, that someone would be, not longest, excuse me, I really mean, what is your perspective on what is the shortest amount of time for returns? Should people be looking at investing with anything less than a 2-year commitment?
Well, actually, for equity investing, I use a timeline that says 5 years.
All right.
If you have an objective that's 5 years or longer in duration, then equity could be appropriate. If it's less than 5 years, it belongs in cash, CDs, fixed income, because you need permanence and definition when you need the money.
Okay. Thank you very much. When we come back, could we talk about estate planning?
I'd be more than happy to.
Grand. Thank you. Rick, before we move into estate planning, can you just tell me, is there a particular age that people should begin investing?
Actually, in my opinion, the earlier, the better. The one thing that people need to realize is the true creator of wealth is systematic savings and investment over a long period of time so you can achieve compounded growth with your resources. So even when you start out as a young adult with your first job or enter your profession, it's important to try to put something away for the long term. In 30 or 40 years, when you're getting ready to retire, you'll be very glad you did. So
there won't be anyone that would scoff at someone coming in and saying, I want to invest $25.
No, we at the First National Bank of Brookfield are there for the community, and we are there to service every need that a client may potentially have.
Well, then let's go into the other direction. Estate planning, my understanding is you would do it prior to retirement, somewhere around retirement. When do you begin estate planning? Certainly not at the same time when you begin investment.
Well, there are actually various levels of estate planning that one needs to be concerned with, and even at a relatively young age, you need to think in terms of what legal documents you have to handle your estate in the event of of premature death. And it's particularly important, for example, if you're married and you have young children, the issue of guardianship.
All right.
And if you don't have a will, then the state of Illinois will determine who that should be.
So when you're saying that you can begin to do estate planning as soon as you have some responsibilities for other people beyond yourself.
Yes, if you want to control the process, then really you need to make the decision on which approach you want to use to handle your estate. Be it a will, a simple will. Many people will do a revocable living trust.
Sure.
But in either case, you're not allowing the state to dictate what happens to your estate.
All right. Should you then, as you progress and get older, should you involve your older adult children in that estate planning?
I think it's very important for people to be able to discuss it, because every family is going to have different issues, and it's very important for children to know what their parents want. So I think that needs to be communicated, and they should be part of the planning process. In addition to that, as we all get older, there are different issues that come into play, and for many people, the issue of federal estate tax is one where if you do some planning, you can really help to minimize that. If you don't, you're going to probably end up giving a gift to Uncle Sam.
Okay. Can the people in your bank, though, then be facilitators of that conversation? Because I know that sometimes parents and their adult children feel very uncomfortable talking about after their death. That particular topic seems to be something that people don't talk about.
That's true, and again, it's something that the family has to work out. We can facilitate, we do work with families on this particular issue, and again, it's very important to really do what you can, given everybody's comfort level.
Sure.
So you end up with the best result possible.
Can you briefly tell us the kind of information you need to bring into the bank if you're going to do some estate planning? What do you need to come with?
Well, we really would sit down and I would do a lot of listening. I would ask a number of questions because we want to know what is it you want accomplished with your estate. Many people want to minimize the tax burden on their heirs.
Of course.
Some people want restrictions placed on how their wealth is going to be inherited. So there are various things that, again, come into play, and we would go through a certain profiling session to ask certain questions to get a feel for what is important to this particular family.
Mr. Rodriguez, thank you very much for coming in. I'm glad that you've given us some additional information to think about, and thank you for joining us this evening with our program, Our Community Matters. Bye now.